Okay, so as you heard, I'm Craig Parnham. I'm one of the founders of Cognition, and our purpose is really to empower organisations to transform and innovate and thrive. We use some design thinking approaches, which you'll see shortly, and this ties in really nicely with the work we've done with Unique recently, in terms of creating much more humanistic experiences. Just a quick overview of us. So we were founded a few years ago. We're the innovation practice of Certis, who are one of the core sponsors for today. We've got a presence here in Auckland and Wellington, but also Sydney and Melbourne. We're technology agnostic, so whilst we're here with an IBM, we go into a lot of our engagements with a very open mind in terms of the technology and fit for purpose. We heard Google is really good for some uses, but we have found that there are other options, and so we take a much more agnostic approach to that. In those 3 years, we've done around 75 digital transformation engagements. Whilst our core team and associates are about 20 people, we've got access to about 160 through Certis and other people we've partnered up with. And this little diagram on the left here, this is our methodology. So you can see it's circular. It draws on a lot of agile and customer experience and design thinking methods and principles. Underneath each of these 6 phases, we've got access to about 60 different methods that we apply to create really tailored engagements. So what I'll go through today, there are 2 parts to what I was going to share. The first one is this is our 3-phase process for creating a cognitive app or cognitive solution. So I'll go through these. I'll centre more on the first one. Amanda covered off around how you go and build an actual digital human, so I won't spend too much time on that. But in terms of understanding those use cases, so we'll just jump into those. After that, on the top line here, these are some of the design thinking methods, so I'll do a short synopsis of some of the common ones that we use as well. So firstly, identifying use cases and business case, helping with that business case. So we find that the first step of those of our workshop designs really focus around context canvas. I'll go into that one in a little bit more detail. But these are just like short workshops, and just make sure there's really broad and consistent alignment across an organisation around where, what are the changes happening within the business, where they might be competitive pressures or regulatory pressures. Go through that, identify, and that really helps draw out where there are like the biggest opportunities to address. And value chain analysis, so one of the workshop exercises is going to look at value chain. Our belief is that by identifying those pain points and matching those up with digital capabilities, then you can really drill down and work out what's the incremental value you'll get from each of those digital capabilities. And so value chain is a really great way to really help build that business case, and then prioritise those based on the difficulty of those specific use cases that you're looking to address. We've got some other tools, Concept Canvas, that ensures you've got a consistent set of information around every single digital capability you're looking at in isolation, and then strategic alignment helps you kind of thread those together into a roadmap. The other thing we've got here is just like looking at the maturity. So one of the points that Max has made is around digital ambition as well as digital capability, and so what we do is we use some of these design thinking tools to, the selection of tools, as I said, we've got 60 in our toolkit, but the ones we apply depend on the level of ambition, but also the level of capability within an organisation as well. Okay, next up we've got ideating and building. So again, one thing that's common, we did an engagement recently where it was a pretty large organisation, and they didn't have a service vision, and so some of these tools like a cover story vision really help build alignment around what's that level of ambition and of change, and how do we create a blueprint of where they want to get to in the not too distant future. Empathy mapping, Max is going to run a short session around empathy mapping after this, and that's really getting into the heart of what's really important to customers, what are their frustrations and the like as well. Journey mapping is another one where that really helps work out where what's the end-to-end process, and I was speaking at the break with a couple of people about how this is a really great opportunity to really challenge yourselves around, you know, some of the existing processes that you've got. One of our favourite war stories is some work we did in telco, and going through that journey mapping and detailing and challenging, we found that, you know, some of the forms they were using hadn't been looked at for, like, you know, 10 years, and so it's an opportunity to sort of modernise as you go through as well. And then as you move into the build phase, the archetypal lens is really important as well. So I've heard this come through in a few of the other presentations, but brand and aligning these experiences with your brand, and Digital Human's perfect for that, right? Because it's really bringing that personality, the sense of, you know, the tone and manner and everything, can make that a really engaging and believable experience. And then the final one is delivery and management. So Amanda covered a lot of this. The key thing that we've really noticed is that once you've deployed and got your Digital Human live, that's not the end of the journey. They are like any other staff member, and you've got to constantly train them and take on board feedback. So that's where it's really important to have a feedback loop and make sure that you can, you know, just continue to improve. But also going through this process, some of those tools, what they really help you do is identify where's the best use case to start with, and then, you know, an observation we've made is rather than going too broad, it's better to start relatively small. So some work we were doing with Unique recently, we were just looking at venue hire for a large council and just looked at that as the use case, and then where do you expand and how do you expand, and make sure that you're constantly getting a return as you go. So that's the three-step process that we generally go through. Although that looks quite daunting in terms of the amount of activities in that, generally, in the case of that organisation I was just mentioning, we broke this down into 6-hour workshops. So there's one that focused really around the customer service design, and then the second workshop was really looking at the ideation and the build and the prioritisation. So these are some of the common activities we do. Just to go through some of these in a little more detail. These will all be available on the social learning platform, so you're welcome to take photos, but they'll be available later as well. So context canvas, we find this is a really good place to start. The reason we use this is that often there's a lot of organisations are fairly siloed, and there's often not a lot of alignment across the upper echelons of the business. So this really looks at the broader context, not just the business, but you can see here demographic trends, economic and environment, and as I mentioned, we've done around 75 engagements, and so some of the key outtakes we see from those, really consistent for this forum, has been knowledge transfer. So it's a bit of a generalisation, but we do have an ageing workforce. There are people, there have been a lot of immigrants coming in. There are a lot of people, the younger ones are much more digitally savvy, and so, what are the ways in which we can pass on that knowledge? And so this is, Digital Humans is an excellent way for that. Another trend that we've seen in the last decade or so is increased levels of compliance, and that can drive a lot of cost into your business. So what's the role of digital to, expedite some of those increased compliance costs? Economic uncertainty. There's been, there is a lot of uncertainty in the world, and there's a lot of concern around environmental pressures, and so this can have a knock-on impact into many organisations in terms of how they face and address that. Competitive intensity. An observation we've seen in a number of engagements this year is there's a lot of vertical integration happening, and how do people respond to that, or a lot of new entrants coming in, and how do you address the threat of new entrants who are, they're coming out and everything's SaaS and everything's digitized, and so how do you modernize your business to deal with that? Which leads on to the next one in terms of the explosion of technology options, and there's huge fragmentation in the range of options available. So how do you, and that's why we believe it's best to be technology agnostic and to go into any of these engagements with a really open mind around what's fit for purpose for your size, for the size of your business. Customer awareness. So in terms of customer needs, we're sort of seeing that people are a lot more savvy and they're actually educating themselves, and that can be a good thing, but it can also be detrimental if they've if they're not getting balanced and objective information. And in terms of uncertainties, there is quite a fear of getting it wrong, and that's why the approach we take, we think, is the right one, where you're sort of breaking everything down into the smallest increments and delivering value and building that confidence early to then extrapolate things further. Are there any questions on that? Is that straightforward? Okay. Next one is empathy map. So Max will go through one of these with the education use case a little while. This is really important in terms of really understanding the mindset of your end user. So we're saying customer here, but it can be end user. It can be your own employees, but really getting understanding of their frustrations and looking at all those opportunities to deliver better service experiences. Next one's user journey map. As I mentioned before, this looks pretty straightforward, but the key thing that we've learned is that this is a real opportunity to, if you're going to embark on deploying any digital capability, it's a really good opportunity to challenge every single process and really understand why it was created that way, and whether it's still relevant. In the telco example I gave earlier, the telco is a project around streamlining fibre installations, and the consent form, we finally got it dragged out, and it hadn't been reviewed in 10 years, and the primary call to action was to fax it. So that was a bit of a trigger of opportunity to really modernise and digitise some of their processes. Value chain analysis. So there are different ways of doing this one. This is the sort of like a traditional one, traditional model that Porter invented in the late 80s. But with value chain analysis, we really like this tool because if you look at each digital capability, what's the cost and effort to deploy it, but then how do you get a return on that, and what are the matching up the use cases, the volumes of transactions and so forth, to make sure that each capability can stand up. But also when you pair that one up with what I think is the last one, importance difficulty, when you've got an idea of the relative value that can be created from a digital capability, and then you map it to this, that's what really creates a really robust roadmap.